Alright, let's do this. Alright. Hello, people. Me again. Another beautiful day or night. Yep. Hope your five senses work. Health and strength is good. Or excellent. What? What's up, gamers? A couple months ago, actually, listen to this. Only 10% of Xbox games were sold as physical disc in 2023. Only 10% of Xbox games were sold as physical disc in 2023. Here's why. Here's the real answer. I said this to everybody on YouTube. I said this to everybody on YouTube, that the video game industry benefited from the pandemic. The video game industry benefited from the pandemic in digital sales. And then the writing on the wall was clear from there. It was signaling the end of what? Physical copies. I said this to everybody. The video game industry benefited from the pandemic. And I told you the pandemic was about infrastructure. Those who have the infrastructure can weather the storm. So, this article here from Tech for Gamers says only 10% of Xbox games were sold as physical disc in 2023. Why? Because when we were in the pandemic, the only way to get your games were digital. So what that means is that Microsoft made some money, lots of it, during the pandemic. They're just not saying anything. So when you seen these articles, I saw one article. It says Microsoft. I saw this article on neowin.net. It says Microsoft is the second $1 trillion company, second $3 trillion company, right? Apple is the first, Microsoft is second. But in that article it says Facebook is number 3. Facebook has 1 trillion. Then there were some articles that talked about Microsoft letting go, cutting loose about 1,900 people, right? And then there was another article that talks about Microsoft got rid of their physical disk division, right? Why? Because they made a lot of money during the pandemic. Remember, I told you, the video game industry benefited from the pandemic a whole lot. Nintendo did, PlayStation did, PC did, and Xbox did, okay? They made a lot of money during the pandemic. They're just not saying anything. So when Microsoft is sitting here letting go of people, the writing became clear. The writing was on the wall. Physical games are about to go bye-bye. Okay? It ain't about video game preservation anymore. It's the fact that the companies, these video game companies, they were able to save some money from they were able to save some money by not putting the game on a physical disc. But they made a lot of money. They made a lot of money during the pandemic. Okay? So when this article is saying, oh, only 10% of Xbox games were sold as physical discs in 2023, that means 90% of Xbox games were sold digitally. And they made money. Okay? Yes, they did. Okay? Anyway, listen to this. Says here, explain why Microsoft shut down physical game department. It's because of the pandemic. They made a lot of money during the pandemic. Video. The only way you could get your games was what? Digitally. Yeah. And the pandemic is about what? Infrastructure. Anyway, listen to this. A report outlines the ratio of physical copies sold for all major gaming platforms. Xbox had the least physical copies sold, following by PlayStation and Nintendo. It says this might be why Xbox recently laid off its entire physical games department. Yeah, because they made a lot of money. They made a lot of money digitally during the pandemic, and the Xbox One and PS4 benefited from the pandemic digitally. Anyway, and guess what? You just learned that from me. But anyway, it says here. Let me stop playing here. It says here. Sir Kano, Matt Piscatella, has revealed physical copies were sold the least on Xbox. Yeah, physical copies were sold the least on Xbox. But during the pandemic, Xbox made a bulk load. That's what this article is not telling you. Anyway, it says at the same time, PlayStation and Nintendo shared almost the same number. It says this comes after an analysis revealed that almost 83% of console games sold in 2023 were digital. Like I said to everybody before, and I was the first person who said this, even before the news media even said anything. I told you, the video game industry benefited from the pandemic. Yeah. Anyway, it says here, according to a recent report, Microsoft has also shut down its physical game department. Why it matters? Physical copies have a lot of more advantage compared to digital. These include preservation, resales, and more. However, the trend seems to be changing. Yeah. It says here, for Circana retail tracking service in the U.S. in 2023, physical spending on software for the Nintendo platform account for more than half of the total physical software spending. Physical spending on software for Xbox platform accounted for less than 10% of total physical spending. Microsoft made a lot of money digitally during the pandemic. Okay. Anyway, it says here Matt Piscatella at Matt Piscatella, January 26th. Then it says here all of Xbox 2023 sales in the U.S. only 10% were physical. And like I said to you, again, the video game industry benefited from the pandemic. So if they only made 10% of physical copies, that means they made 90% in digital sales. Yeah. Anyway, for PlayStation and Nintendo, this figure was much higher at 40% and 50% respectively. Overall, Xbox audience seems to be more inclined towards digital games. The video game industry benefited from the pandemic. Anyway, says here, on the other hand, PlayStation and Nintendo have significant physical market. This divide is not too surprising when considering the difference in the game distribution between the companies. Microsoft relies on Game Pass primarily, getting its audience accustomed to digital downloads and library. Much of its shares in this generation also comes from the Xbox Series S, which is an all-digital console. Still, these figures highlight the eventual demise of physical games. This movement seems to be in motion at Xbox already. Last week, Walmart, to get rid of physical stocks, was selling Starfield copies for just 3 cents. Says here, they are even supposed to throw them out if the stock lasts after the sale. Best Buy is expected to do the same soon, and Microsoft much anticipated Sooner, Saga Hellblade will be a digital release only. Microsoft benefited from the pandemic. Okay, they made a lot. Okay, says here elsewhere. Comments from Ubisoft highlights how publisher feels about physical games, with the French company claiming customers need to familiarize themselves with the lack of physical ownership. But I beat Ubisoft to the punch already when I said the video game industry benefited from the pandemic because you couldn't buy physical games during the pandemic. They were all digital. Yeah. Anyway, it says here, for those who prefer physical game, PlayStation and Nintendo might be the only choice moving forward. While we don't support the idea of completely abandoning physical games, this seems to be inevitable future, even more so for Xbox. Features image credited LifeWire. Alright. So Microsoft is going all digital. The article talks about they only sold 10%. But yeah. But 90% of their revenue from the Xbox came from digital sales. And when the pandemic was at an all-time high, they benefited from it a whole lot. So the writing was on the wall, okay? And that's where that's where all this is coming from, okay? So they're trying to get away from physical copies and go all digital. Okay? The pandemic was about infrastructure, and those who had the infrastructure can weather the storm. Okay, so they made their money off digital sales, and they're realizing that they're having better success with digital sales versus physical. Now, some games they can keep keep physical, like say Halo or probably I would say probably Starfield or probably Sea of Thieves, but they got Game Pass now, so Game Pass is brought Microsoft a lot of success, so they're going all digital, and that is because of what they seen. To me, that's what they probably seen. How they were making profits during the pandemic. So yeah, digital is the future, and then it'll save them some money too. From like putting games on physical disc. Okay, so yeah, they saw the writing and they were like, they're looking at the numbers and they're looking at what they're getting, and yeah, and they only sold 10%, but that means 90% of their sales are from digital. So Microsoft, they got the infrastructure for it, so that's look like that's what they're doing. They're getting away from physical copies. And this also too now, ties into what I said about Nintendo and that virtual console. And when it came to video, the virtual console was about, it's like your museum, your hard drive, your bookstore, your library, your bunker, and your archive for your video game. So that virtual console is like it's for like video game preservation. It really is. And they to me they I mean they're talking about they made a lot of sales during the pandemic. But just imagine if they would have refreshed the Wii U and just keep using it and put all their games in the virtual console before the pandemic hit. And then when the pandemic comes around now, they would have been more ready. They would have made, like I told you, they would have made 5 to 10 times the amount if they would have did that. Just saying. But other than that, man, Microsoft had success during the pandemic, and they saw the writing on the wall. You know, because a lot of the Xbox fans were buying their games digitally. You know, even when the Xbox Series X came out and the PS5 came out, and then you had the scalping situation. People that had Xbox One and PS4, the games that were meant for the Xbox Series X, and let's say PlayStation 5, those games can be played on the PlayStation. Those games can be played on the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. So yeah, they made a lot of money that way, because I mean the Xbox One user base is pretty big. PS4 user base is pretty big, and then on top of that, they were making money off the 360's digital storefront, and Sony was making money off the PS3 digital storefront, and plus the PSP and even the Vita. Sony was making all that money from the PSP, the Vita, the PS3, and the PS4 during the pandemic. Microsoft, they were making money from the 360 and the Xbox One during the pandemic. Yeah. Or even PC. So, Nintendo had to switch. But if Nintendo would have put all their games in the virtual console like they were supposed to, they would have made at least 5 times the amount compared to what they would have. I think during the Activision court case, they said Nintendo made $60 billion, but that is pocket change compared to what they would have really made if they would have took all those before the pandemic. If they would have took all those games from all those Game Boys and all those consoles that they made and stored it in the virtual console, by the time and then refresh the Wii U and continue using it, by the time the pandemic comes around, they would have made a whole lot more than $60 billion. So yeah, but yeah, the video game industry benefited from the pandemic. The pandemic was about infrastructure, and Microsoft benefited a whole lot from it. Sony benefited a whole lot from the pandemic because Sony had still had the PS3 store up, PS4 store up, and they were still selling PSP games digitally, PlayStation Vita games digitally. They still were selling PS1, PS2s, PS3 games digitally in the PS3 store. And the PlayStation 4 store, benefited, from the pandemic, but also benefited from the PlayStation 5 because the games that were meant for PlayStation 5, you can play them on the PS4. And then the Xbox One benefited from the Series X. So some of the games that were for the Series X, you can play them on Xbox One. So they made a lot of money during the pandemic. Make no mistake about it. So yeah, the article might say Microsoft only sold 10% of copies, but they made 90% off digital sales during the pandemic. They did, and the writing on the wall became clear. So, and then if they're going all digital now that they got Game Pass, that means they can save some money by not putting their games on a physical CD. You know, yeah. But 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 altogether though, they made a lot. You know, so when you saw the news that they closed down, they let go of 1,900 people, and then you're looking like, you're like, why? But then the new article comes out now and say, okay, Microsoft only sold 10% of 10% copies of games. Okay, 10%. You only send 10% of our physical game copy, 10% of our physical games. Okay, that means you made 90% of your revenue off digital sales with the 360, the Xbox One, and even the Series X. So yeah, and the same goes for PlayStation. They made money off the PS3 in digital sales. They made money off the PS4 in digital sales, and also the PS5. So yeah, they plus they were still making money off the Vita digitally, off the PSP digitally, and then even off the PS1 and PS2 digital games. They were making money, man. So yeah, it's not all bad, man. So yeah, Microsoft did pretty well. They did pretty well financially during the pandemic. You know, this article might say, oh, they only sold 10. It's only 10% of Xbox games were sold as a physical disc in 2023. Okay, 10%. You might think that's bad, but then when you look at the bigger picture now, you realize that they made a lot of money digitally. Okay, that means they made 90% of their revenue off the Xbox, whether it's the Series X, Series X and S, the Xbox One, One X, the One S, the Xbox One, the Xbox One digital console, and the 360. They made a lot of money off those consoles digitally during the pandemic. Oh yeah. So yeah, Microsoft did pretty good, man. They really did. So other than that, physical copies, physical disc are on their way out, and we're heading into digital games, and it is because of the pandemic. Yeah, that's why and those people that they let go of now, it kind of, I mean, it hurts, but they'll recover. But Microsoft is able now to save some money, save some money by not putting their games on disc. Yeah. So yeah. So that's what this article is talking. That's what this article is really alluding to. So other than that, man, they did pretty well. You know, they're just not saying anything. So yeah. But game industry moves on. Games got to be made, and consoles got to be sold, and yeah, expansion has to be made and sold. So yeah, but other than that, they're doing they're fine. Anyway, I'm gonna leave this video for y'all to enjoy. Nice talking to you people again. Chris, still a Star Wars and Star Trek fan, or Dark Side.